Music is very powerful in conveying emotions to the audience. We will interpret scenes completely different depending on the music, but what happens when you remove the music entirely? Can the cinematography and the actors convey the same emotion, or are the emotions without any music totally different? To figure that out, I used AI to remove all music and most sound effects from Pirates of the Caribbean. That means a scene like this suddenly turns into this. Open fire! Yep, that's how I watched the entire movie. The movie utilizes many visual elements that may usually go unnoticed, and focusing on the visuals is so fascinating to me because you've got to remember that nothing we see on screen happens by accident. By removing the music, we shift our focus entirely to the cinematography and acting. That's why I'm excited to show you how some of the most iconic scenes are transformed. And what better place to start than the introduction of Captain Jack Sparrow? This is the first glimpse we got from what turned out to be one of cinema's most iconic characters. He usually gets introduced with very epic music. With no dialogue in Jack's intro, removing the music leaves the scene completely silent. But as it turns out, the music is actually only a small part of what made this introduction so great. The first shot we get from him is a classic hero shot. The way he's framed from down below and then the close-up on his face as he stares into the horizon lets us know that this is an important, powerful character. This expectation is then intercut by showing him from a wide shot, which reveals that he's actually on a tiny boat which is also sinking. So now it seems like he isn't so powerful after all and is actually in big trouble, but while his situation looks hopeless, he manages to end up right where he wanted. This purely visual demonstration perfectly encapsulates the essence of what makes Captain Jack Sparrow so iconic. We're never sure if he's a fool or a genius, but he somehow always ends up on top.
You are without doubt the worst pirate I've ever heard of.
But you have heard of me.
And speaking of sinking, Elizabeth's near drowning scene relies heavily on dramatic music.
Do not lose this.
But without it, you notice something strange. Everyone is a little too calm.
Will you be saving her then?
I can't swim.
Besides one worried expression from Commodore Norrington, everybody seems pretty chill, which, let's be honest, feels a bit ridiculous given the situation. Everybody's like, oh, she's drowning, but she's one of the main characters, so she'll be fine. This scene really shows just how much music drives the tension. Without it, we rely solely on the visuals, and sometimes they don't fully deliver the same emotional punch. I think switching from smooth camera moves to a shaky camera and/or faster cuts could have visually established more panic and urgency. What I love, however, is the visual representation of future danger as the medallion hits the water. They take the time to visually establish a change in the wind, and the ambient color of everything changes. Where this port looked warm and cozy a minute ago, everything is now a lot cooler, which soon changes into complete darkness and terror. Captain Jack Sparrow's first escape in typical Jack Sparrow fashion is again joined by intense music that enhances his genius.
Open fire!
Without music, this escape becomes even more ridiculous.
Open fire!
It's ridiculous, but not in a negative way. I mean, these types of escapes are what we love about Jack Sparrow. However, this moment shows how much of Jack's charm is tied up in the upbeat, playful soundtrack that usually accompanies his clever moves. Here are some other examples.
Thank you, Commodore, for getting us ready to make way.
Without that music, his brilliance feels a bit flat. Now, I'll admit that aspect was more about the brilliance of music and not really the visuals, but one aspect of removing the music is learning to appreciate it when it's there. But let's focus back on the visuals. That night when the Black Pearl attacks Port Royal, we witness yet another great use of visuals. This time I'll actually first play the scene without music. What did that short clip tell you? It was suspenseful and felt like danger is coming, right? Having Elizabeth's concerned face in focus as the flame is extinguished by the wind, and then seeing that cold, dark, foggy alleyway with a nervous cat are great visual cues that are easy to understand and don't require a single word or music. Of course, adding a suspenseful music can add to that effect. But as you've just heard, the music they actually use is very subtle. The visual cues were so effective, the scene would have also worked without any music. And sometimes complete silence can be even more terrifying. That visual tension is then followed up by visual terror, showing us all these explosions and the chaos, which gives a great payoff to that. In this chaos, Elizabeth gets captured by the Black Pearl, which leads to another very interesting scene when we remove the music. In this scene, Captain Barbossa explains to us the backstory around the medallion. During that exposition, his creepy stare of watching Elizabeth eat just stood out to me even more. But then there's a tonal shift when he lets us know that they're planning on killing Elizabeth. With music, this looks or sounds like this.
Yet.
The music switches from slow, tense music to a dramatic, fast-paced music, which already says everything we need to know. Again, the power of music is insane, but what happens visually to support that? This is how the scene feels without music.
Yet.
Without the music, Elizabeth's terror is carried entirely by her expression. Then we get that first fast movement in this scene as Elizabeth slaps the apple away, and for me it looks like the filmmakers briefly transitioned to a handheld camera. The handheld camera adds a sense of unease, and while it's subtle, you start to notice how much more you focus on body language and quick movements to understand the rising danger. Then we get these very fast-paced cuts, which adds to the visual panic. Elizabeth then heads on deck of the Black Pearl, where she gets thrown around by skeletons. If you already thought that scene was crazy, here's how it is without music. Pretty awkward, right? However, one visual aspect that stood out to me is its sudden shift in ambient color. Right before this we had the warm candlelight, and now it's very cold, dark, and desaturated. This adds to the terror and danger Elizabeth is probably feeling in this moment. In fact, let's briefly talk about color in this movie. Color is one of the strongest visual elements a movie can use to convey emotions. We notice color immediately and respond to it emotionally. This effect is at its strongest when there is a color contrast. This can happen in one shot, from shot to shot, like it did in this scene, or from sequence to sequence. In this movie there are three main groups of characters. The Royal Navy, the let's call them good pirates, and the bad pirates of the Black Pearl. All these groups have very distinct color palettes that reflect their personalities and roles in the story. The Navy features very clean, bright, saturated colors consisting of mainly white, red, and blue. These colors symbolize order, discipline, and loyalty. Whenever we see the Navy, the world feels structured and safe. Contrast that with the Black Pearl's pirates, who exist in a world drained of color with about 50 different shades of gray. Anyway, this lack of color represents their soullessness. They are literally and figuratively lifeless, unable to feel anything. And now guess what color spectrum fits between these two extremes? That's right, Captain Jack Sparrow and his crew. Their color palette consists of warm, brownish, dimmer colors. They are a lot filthier than the Navy, but not as filthy as the bad pirates. This makes them feel grounded yet chaotic, without the strict order of the Navy or soullessness of the cursed pirates. Even Jack Sparrow's costume reflects this middle ground, with its red and black accents blending aspects of both worlds. But I'm not just talking about the literal colors of their clothes, but just the ambient hue of the scenes they're in is a lot warmer. This makes scenes with them feel very comfortable and familiar. These warmer colors make us naturally feel more comfortable with the quote-unquote good guys, and emphasizes the middle ground Jack Sparrow has with these two extremes. Yes, he's a pirate, but he's also a good man.
He's a pirate and a good man.
Without music to set the tone, you realize just how much the ambient color palette is doing to make you feel certain ways about characters and situations. Whether it's the cold desaturation of the Black Pearl or the warm familiarity of Jack's crew. Color is always guiding our emotions, even if we don't always notice it. The emotion in this next scene, however, is very different without music. In this scene, we think Will died and Jack's crew was captured, but then Will suddenly appears and saves them. Usually his appearance is paired with very epic music.
Barbossa!
Although the visuals are fitting, without the music his appearance felt a lot less dramatic.
Barbossa!
It actually made me understand Barbossa's perspective a lot more. This scene highlights something interesting about how music manipulates our emotions. In reality, there wouldn't be any epic score letting everyone, including Barbossa, know that Will's arrival is a big moment. Without the music, Barbossa's confusion makes a lot more sense. Movies use these cues to make us feel things that characters wouldn't naturally feel in the moment.
Who are you?
No one. He's no one.
In the final battles of this movie, there really wasn't a lot of dialogue. It was mostly just fighting with lots of dramatic and epic music. Usually this is totally fine, and the music gives us that triumphant feeling of the final battle. Without the sweeping music to tell us this is a grand finale, the action feels less urgent. The visuals alone just don't scream final battle to me. It's impressive, but missing that epic sense of scale. I guess it just goes to show how much we actually rely on music to estimate where we are in the story. If I hadn't watched this movie before and I wouldn't know that movies are typically around 2 hours long, I would have no idea that this is the final battle. In other films, strong visual cues like more extreme camera angles, dramatic lighting shifts, or unique editing patterns can still signal that we're in the climax. The Pirates movie, at least this first one, just chooses to rely on music for this. Now to some final thoughts. Should you watch this movie without music? No, of course not. That isn't what I wanted to achieve with this experiment. If anything, I think through this experiment I learned to appreciate music even more, because as we've seen in this movie, even if the visuals are great, adding music will often enhance the effect. It's like a sandwich of elements that adds up to make something great. If you remove one layer from that sandwich, it will reduce the overall flavor. But the other layers of this movie really are great. Great action set pieces, great dialogue, great cinematography, and great actors. That's really the biggest takeaway for me, the great actors. The cinematography also gives them time to shine with so many close-ups on their faces, and with good actors, that's sometimes all you need to convey emotions visually. Removing the music also made me realize how little dialogue there actually is in this movie, which isn't a critique, it's just an observation. Many scenes just really consist of great visuals and great music. I mean, if you got Hans Zimmer, I guess you want to let him do his thing, right? Besides that, I really enjoyed focusing on the visuals. In a big budget movie like this, there's so many people working on it that nothing is left to chance. The color difference between the three groups, for example. These things didn't just happen. Somebody put them there with intent, and I love trying to figure that out.
Well, I'm actually feeling rather good about this.
I hope this experiment made you realize just how much thought goes into every frame of a movie. And I also put a lot of effort in this video, so let me know if you liked it, because I would love to make this a series. If so, please share your thoughts on what other movies we should watch without music, and I'll see you in the next one.